Shortly after 6:30 a.m. on June 6, 1944, along this stretch of sand, soldiers from the U.S. 1st Infantry Division disembarked from their landing craft into a barrage of gunfire that claimed the lives of hundreds within minutes. Over the following hours, many more would succumb as troops found themselves pinned down on the beach, exposed to relentless machine gun fire. The only barrier preventing disaster that morning was the bravery of small groups of soldiers who faced the hail of bullets to breach the defenses of the Atlantic Wall. In this video, we will combine cutting-edge technology, actual footage from that day, and testimonies from those who experienced it to trace the steps of the men from one landing craft on that pivotal day who were among the very first to breach Omaha Beach. When the decision was finally made in early 1944 regarding the location for the long-anticipated Allied assault into Northwest Europe, it was evident to everyone that the task would be anything but simple. Let's explore the reasons behind this. The specific site selected for the D-Day landings was in the Normandy region of France. Divided across 5 primary invasion beaches, British forces from the 3rd Infantry Division would land on Sword Beach. Adjacent to them, Canadian troops would come ashore at Juno. To their west, the British 50th Division would land on the beach codenamed Gold, while U.S. forces would arrive at Utah Beach on the Cotentin Peninsula. Between these locations lay one final site, to be attacked by American troops from the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, Omaha Beach. Omaha was, in reality, quite distinct from the other beaches. Stretching 3.7 miles, it is a beautiful crescent of golden sands. However, what sets it apart, and makes it a nightmare to assault, is the continuous line of high ground or bluffs that runs along its length, just beyond the beach. Rising to about 100 feet, it was not insurmountable, but from the perspective of the defenders, it provided unobstructed views of the entire approach, excellent opportunities to fortify and establish defenses, and compelled any attacker to fight uphill to seize control.
If there was a potential drawback to this location, which is itself a matter of debate, it lies in these 5 natural inlets shaped like valleys that extend from the beach inland, ultimately connecting to the main road situated away from the coast. These inlets, referred to as draws, were recognized by the Allies as crucial for breaching Omaha. They not only provided a route inland that avoided the need to scale the bluffs, but importantly, they were the sole pathway for armor and vehicles to exit the beach. The challenge was that the Germans were aware of this as well. In fact, their entire defensive setup in this region, which was quite formidable, was built on this very understanding. This segment of the Atlantic Wall, like all others, consisted of a series of strong points known as Widerstand or resistance nests. These WNs included a variety of defensive installations, ranging from concrete pillboxes and rifle positions manned by a single soldier to large casemates hiding anti-tank guns and everything in between. Each WN was strategically positioned to provide mutual support and to oversee one of the key draws leading off the beach. In this area, there were 15 distinct positions, connected by trenches that ran along the bluffs, manned by around 1,000 soldiers, equipped with over 80 machine guns, 18 anti-tank guns, and at least 9 mortar positions. A very tough nut to crack. Yet, it had to be cracked, and when Allied planners began to analyze Omaha in detail, they, like with all other beaches, divided it into individual sectors. In the west, where the Rangers and the men of the 29th Infantry Division were set to land, were the Charlie, Dog Green, White, and Red sectors, along with Easy Green, while the eastern half was assigned to the highly esteemed U.S. 1st Infantry Division, known as the Big Red One. Our focus will be on those men, particularly the Easy Red sector. So, what about the attackers? For this video, we will concentrate on just 32 men who landed together in an LCVP, or Higgins boat during the first wave that morning. They were the individuals from E Company, 16th Infantry Regiment, led by the 29-year-old Second Lieutenant John Spaulding. By consulting the extensive records archive at Find My Past, we discover that John Martin Spaulding was born on December 17, 1914, in Indiana to a working-class family. His father, Hugh, was recorded in the 1930 U.S. National Census as a cooper by profession, employed at a tobacco factory in Owensboro, Kentucky, where John and his 4 siblings grew up. An additional record from February 1941 reveals that John had enlisted in the Army in Louisville, Kentucky, prior to the war's outbreak as a private soldier, eventually being commissioned as a second lieutenant in the 1st Infantry Division, precisely where he found himself on the eve of D-Day. Although he had yet to experience combat, he was eager to contribute. Accompanying him in his boat's section and serving as his deputy section leader was Technical Sergeant Philip Phil Streising. Despite being 4 years Spaulding's junior, Streising, a New Jersey native of Polish descent, possessed extensive experience. Drafted in 1940, he had already served in Tunisia and Sicily, where he earned 3 Silver Stars for bravery and built a reputation as a courageous and resourceful soldier. His leadership skills propelled him swiftly to the rank of Technical Sergeant. Known for his sharp intellect and quick wit, he was said to intimidate young GIs as much as the enemy. Yet when it came to battle, no one questioned Streising's capabilities. Also, part of the section were men such as Sergeants Colwell, Colson, and Biscoe, along with 20-year-old Vincent Vinnie Digitano from Brooklyn, who bore the daunting responsibility of carrying the section's flamethrower. Thus, these 32 men, along with the rest of E Company's 16th Infantry Regiment, were tasked with breaching the defenses of Hitler's Atlantic Wall at this segment of Easy Red. Their mission was straightforward: to land in this region, move up the E1 draw into Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer, and neutralize enemy defenses along the way, particularly at WN64. By accomplishing this, they would open up one half of the E1 draw, enabling subsequent waves to advance through the Lorette Valley and outflank the remaining defenses on Omaha. At least, that was the plan. This aerial photograph provides a chilling insight into that iconic moment in history, while also allowing us to examine the area as it appeared at that time. In the Easy Red sector, we can distinctly pinpoint the positions of German defenses, including WN64, which was still under construction on D-Day. Perhaps most crucial is this site, the remnants of a demolished house referred to on Allied maps as the Roman ruins. This served as a vital orientation point on Easy Red, and its precise location can still be recognized today by this concrete block, which existed in 1944 and indicates exactly where the ruins, now long gone, were once situated. This will be the setting where Spaulding's, and consequently our narrative, will unfold. To recount that tale, we have the advantage of Spaulding's own words and memories from that significant day. By 6:30 a.m. on June 6th, his vessel, filled with frightened, drenched, and nearly entirely seasick soldiers, was making its way to the shore as part of the first wave on Omaha Beach. When we were 200 yards from the shore, the boat stopped, and a member of the Navy crew shouted for us to lower the ramp. Sergeant Fred Biscoe and I kicked the ramp down. Just before this, a Navy man had set up a machine gun at the back of the LCVP and began to return fire. We were now under fire from not only machine guns, but also mortars and artillery. We had arrived at low tide, and the obstacles were clearly visible. As we disembarked from the boat, We spread out in a V formation, approximately 30 yards wide. Soon, we felt a significant drop in the sand beneath our feet, and before long, we were in over our heads, prompting us to attempt to swim. Sergeant Strezich and the medic, Private George Bowen, were hauling an 18-foot ladder intended for crossing the anti-tank ditch or for any other necessary use. They struggled with it in the water, just as I was facing my most challenging moments afloat. As the ladder passed by me, I seized it. Strezich shouted, "Lieutenant, we don't need any assistance." But honestly, I was focused on seeking help, not providing it. What Spaulding and his men quickly discovered was that instead of landing directly on the beach, they had actually struck a sandbar and had to navigate several deep pools, which nearly proved fatal before even reaching the shore. Now cold, completely soaked, and still hundreds of yards away from the questionable safety at the base of the bluffs in this area. They had to make their way as best they could towards their goal. Their saving grace was, in many respects, a tragic one. The fire they encountered was less than they might have anticipated for several reasons. Firstly, they had landed in front of a relatively weak spot between WN62 and WN64 in a lightly defended section of the beach. Unfortunately, the other reason was that the remainder of E Company and most of the 16th had not. Drifting to their left during their approach, they had landed directly into the mouth of WN62, one of the most formidable defensive positions on Omaha. Consequently, the gunners in that position had plenty of easier targets much closer by, and the devastation they inflicted in just a few minutes on the rest of E Company and the 16th was horrific. For Spaulding and his men, advancing across the beach remained a daunting challenge. While navigating the beach obstacles, they had to steer clear of mines, mortar fire, and a significant amount of small arms fire, pushing forward as quickly as their heavy equipment and soaked clothing would permit. During this period, Privates Roper and Tilley were both injured, but fortunately, no one was killed. A few moments later, the situation shifted as Sergeant Raimundo approached the area near the Roman ruins. Spotting the beleaguered E Company soldiers under WN62 several hundred yards to his left, he began to move in their direction, only to be struck and killed by a sniper positioned on the bluffs above. It was in this location, sheltered beneath the bluffs of Omaha Beach, that Spaulding's men finally managed to return fire, targeting isolated riflemen and several hidden machine gun positions to their left. Unfortunately for PFC Digitano, he was ordered to return to the beach to retrieve the flamethrower pack that had nearly drowned him on the way to shore. At this moment, Spaulding, alongside the vastly experienced Streisig, took stock of their situation. It was evident they were isolated, albeit in a dead spot with a small natural gully in front of them. They seemed to be faring better than their comrades further down the beach, leaving them with only one option: to push forward, scale the bluffs, and silence those guns. To achieve this, a section of barbed wire ahead needed to be breached using the Bangalore torpedo, a task accomplished by Staff Sergeant Colwell, which ultimately opened a path for them to climb the bluffs. With Streisig leading the way and leveraging his extensive experience to navigate the hundreds of mines embedded in the slopes, they began to advance along this route, possibly passing a fortunately silent German machine gun position, all while utilizing the numerous dips and depressions for cover from small arms fire. By now, it was approximately 7:30. The men of E Company, as always led by Streisig, advanced painfully slowly against increasingly heavy small arms fire, constantly at risk of tripping over mines hidden beneath their feet. Over the next hour, This advance continued, with commands strung out and the leading elements probing the enemy line, occasionally engaging small groups of enemy soldiers in a truly nerve-wracking experience. For the men of E Company, there was a specific position held by a solitary machine gunner just below the crest ahead, which was proving to be quite troublesome.
Here's Spaulding again. I couldn't take my eyes off the machine gun positioned above us, while Sergeant Biscoe repeatedly warned, "Lieutenant, watch out for the damn mines." They were small box-type mines, and it appeared that the area was crawling with them. We felt the Lord's presence, and it seemed we had an angel on each shoulder during that mission. In an attempt to neutralize the machine gun above us, Sergeant Blades fired his bazooka, but missed. Almost immediately, he was shot in the left arm. Next, Private First Class Curley was also taken down. Sergeant Phelps took up a firing position and was hit in both legs. By this point, nearly all my section had advanced. We made the decision to charge the machine gun located about 15 yards away. As we rushed forward, the lone German manning the gun raised his hands and shouted, "Comrade!" We could have killed him, but we needed prisoners for interrogation, so I instructed the men not to fire. He turned out to be Polish. Records indicate that the Polish-speaking Sergeant Streisy, after exchanging some heated words with the Polish prisoner who had stubbornly defended his position and was fortunate to survive, continued to push towards the top of the bluffs, leaving the wounded in the care of Private Bowen, the section medic. For the others, the advance persisted, this time led by Sergeant Clarence Colson, who fired the wounded Private Tilley's bar from the hip as he moved forward. He was among the first to reach the summit of the bluffs just minutes later, discovering a well-constructed trench along the crest with a pillbox firing down on the section from the far end. Colson himself recounted what transpired next. Finally, after a grueling and exhausting assault through the horrors of Omaha Beach, a glimmer of hope emerged. Despite the devastation occurring on either side, some men had breached the enemy line, reached the top of the bluffs, and at last, there was a route inland. While exact records remain ambiguous, it is probable that shortly after Clarence Colson silenced the machine gun, the men of G Company, 16th Infantry Regiment, led by Captain Joe Dawson, who had landed just 20 minutes after Spaulding's group and also made the ascent, established contact. In a swift discussion, it was determined that Dawson's group would veer left to launch an assault towards Colville-sur-Mer, while Spaulding's group would turn right and continue their attack towards WN-64. Over the next few hours, they would indeed follow through with this plan. For both groups, the fighting was far from over as they advanced from hedgerow to hedgerow, armed with rifles and grenades, and many more men would ultimately pay the highest price. Yet against all odds, Omaha Beach had been breached. The extraordinary feats accomplished by Spaulding, Streisig, Dawson, and all the men of the 16th were not isolated incidents. Further down the beach, other soldiers had also discovered openings, and gradually those still pinned down by the fire from the WNs began to move. By the end of the day, a small but crucial foothold on this segment of Fortress Europe had been secured. This photograph, capturing a moment in time from that notorious day, offers a glimpse into the significance of what those men achieved. Across Omaha at the Shingle, near abandoned landing crafts, and throughout the beach, over 3,000 men lay dead, dying, or wounded. Had it not been for the courageous actions of those who went above and beyond that day, the casualties could have been exponentially higher. For the 32 men of Lieutenant Spaulding's section, possibly the very first to scale the bluffs, fortunes were mixed. Only 2 men, Sergeants Raimundo and Biscoe, would lose their lives. An additional 8 would sustain injuries. 7 men, including Spaulding, Streisig, Dawson, and the medic Bowen, would receive the Distinguished Service Cross, while others were awarded a lesser honor. Several members of the section who survived that day would not make it through the war, falling in the many fierce battles that lay ahead. 2 men who lived only to encounter tragedy were Spaulding and Streisig. The lieutenant, having endured severe battle fatigue later in the war, ultimately returned to Kentucky, became a state legislator, remarried, and had 3 additional children, leading what appeared to be an ideal life. However, this impactful newspaper article, published in the Owensboro Enquirer on November 6, 1959, recounts the tragic conclusion of a man who had accomplished so much. Technical Sergeant Streisig, The legendary soldier of the 1st Infantry Division would eventually return to New Jersey, marry, and have 4 children. Yet the horrors he experienced during over 440 days of combat, from North Africa to the Hurtgen Forest, would haunt him forever. Plagued by PTSD and enduring physical pain from his wartime injuries, Philip Streisig took his own life in June 1958, becoming perhaps the last of many casualties from that bloody day on Omaha Beach.
If you appreciate content like this, be sure to check out our video that delves into the fighting through Normandy's notorious bocage countryside right after D-Day. That's all for now. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Please remember to like and subscribe.